Hi, it's Ted Patterson, Critical Path Training. Welcome to our webinar today, Introduction to the Power BI Platform. I'd like to just start by calling out that we have a couple hands-on training classes. We have a 4-day deep dive into Power BI named Power BI Bootcamp. November 30th, we're running one the Tuesday after Thanksgiving and then one at the end of January. And these classes are held in Tampa, Florida, or you can attend remotely from wherever you are. You can visit us at criticalpathtraining.com for more information. Okay, let's go ahead and start out with the show today. So we're going to start talking about just what is the Power BI platform. So the first section, we're going to spend about 5 or 10 minutes just building an understanding of what are the different pieces, what are the central concepts. Now, we also need to drill down on the things that we're going to be building, and that's going to be datasets, reports, and dashboards. And along the way, we'll talk about the importance of a workspace in Power BI. Now, you can do things with the browser, but you have a lot more strength to build projects if you embrace something which is a tool called Power BI Desktop. So we're going to have one section where we're going to drill down on that. Now, also, if you're going to be working with Power BI and you're going to be rolling out data analytics and reporting solutions within your company, you're going to have to understand how to manage projects. So we'll quickly cover different aspects of that. And then we'll talk about staying in sync with the monthly updates to the Power BI platform. Now, also, there's going to be a place that you can go and download slides. I'm going to leave this URL up on the slide just for a second. At the very end of today's session, I'll put this back up here just in case you don't copy it down right now. But if you go to this chilp.it 4E58227, that will download the PDF file which is associated with these slides. Okay, now let's talk about what is BI. BI is the process of extracting data, modeling it, and being able to visualize and report on it such that we can see information in a bunch of distilled data and make some type of decision to take corrective actions or to emphasize something that we're doing good at. Now, the software industry, especially with respect to business intelligence, is changing because there's more and more streams of data that are now things that we can potentially analyze for business benefit. So device-generated data, such as locations of vehicles and human beings, such as temperatures of refrigerators, such as things and hardware that can detect some type of cyber break-in. There's just a huge potential to look at new types of data we've never looked at before. One of the leaders of the Power BI team loves to use the Uber company as an example of a company that just has taken data and used it in a very new way to disrupt an entire industry. So over the next couple years, what we're going to see is that there's going to be new ways that people begin using data and types of data that we never thought to use before in some type of strategic or competitive way. So what we'll see right now is the demand for self-service tools are definitely on the rise. And we definitely see products such as Tableau, a great example of a product that just skyrocketed over the last 4 to 5 years because the business leaders, felt like they were empowered and they didn't have to deal with all these blockades that the IT department were putting on them as far as pushing ahead and discovering how to use data in some new competitive fashion. Now, what is Power BI? Like many other new things that Microsoft is selling us, it's a cloud-based subscription service, just like Office 365. And the idea is that you're able to quickly sign up for a particular service and start benefiting. So Power BI definitely follows the software as a service model, something like Salesforce or Office 365. And it is a software as a service style application that promotes self-service BI right down to the end user. So if you're just a lone user and you want to start looking at QuickBooks or you want to start looking at your website and Google Analytics data that's been generated, Power BI is a great thing for self-service BI. If you're building reports and different data analytics projects for others to use within your company, also it's a great authoring tool to create project-based solutions for basically reporting and data analytics. Now, with Power BI, one of the big benefits is that it only takes seconds to sign up. There's nothing to install. You can just basically sign up and begin to use it through the browser. When you want to download their most powerful tool, Power BI Desktop, it downloads in 10 to 15 seconds and installs in under a minute. Now, one thing to note is that we're in the second version of Power BI. The very first version of Power BI was actually scrubbed, and they had to start again. And the reason for that is the very first version of Power BI, known as Power BI for Office 365, took a dependency on both Microsoft Excel and SharePoint Online. Now, there's one particular fellow named James Phillips that Microsoft wrestled away from some others down in Silicon Valley, came in and started leading the team. And the first thing he said is, if we're going to be cloud-based and we need to go on this cadence, which is updates once a month, there's no way that we could have these very harmful dependencies on Microsoft Excel and SharePoint Online. Now, not to take away from Microsoft Excel, but given the fact that it has millions, tens and hundreds of millions of users out there, they can't make changes lightly. They have to go through so much regression testing. So the ability to drop dependencies on Excel and being able to only worry about their own dependencies, has what given the Power BI platform the ability to consistently have these updates at a very fast clip. Now, here's some adoption numbers. As of the beginning of the year, there were 5 million subscribers, over 200,000 organizations or companies that are using it already. Now, other things to note about Power BI. First of all, it sits on top of Microsoft's cloud-based platform known as Microsoft Azure. And there are data centers that are all over the world that Microsoft has for Azure. So as you start to use Power BI, you're going to have some type of a data center that is your home data center. And as you start doing things such as uploading data sets, they're going to live in that one particular place. But what's nice about the benefits of Azure is the ability to scale and the ability to have far international reach as you're building solutions. Let's say a company has offices in Los Angeles and New York and London and Berlin and Tokyo. Well, what's really nice is that there's going to be a wide reach solution. And while things could get technically more involved, certainly there's ways to scale and reach at a global level as you're using Power BI because it's built on top of Microsoft Azure. Now, the first stop as you start working with Power BI is going to be the Power BI service. And you can just access that through the browser by going to app.powerbi.com. Now, if you're going to be building solutions, let's say I assume that you're going to be an author. So what are the different tools that you would use? Well, you can definitely use the browser. You could log on to the Power BI service. You need to get some data. You could upload a CSV file or an Excel workbook that gives you data, and you could start building reports and dashboards right through the browser. Now, if you need to get more involved, you need to write some powerful queries to extract data and transform it. Maybe you need to do data modeling. Well, then you need to move up to a tool which is called Power BI Desktop. Power BI Desktop, you can think of it as all the Power Query and Power Pivot features that you've had in Excel, minus all the other stuff in Excel that you don't want when you're creating a BI solution. We're going to look at Power BI Desktop in a later section, but that is kind of the preferred deep dive tool for building solutions with Power BI. Now, you can also use Microsoft Excel. As I mentioned, Power BI doesn't have dependencies on Excel. So you can create solutions with Power BI that never involve Excel. That being said, if you do like to work with Excel or you have an investment in Excel workbooks, you can connect to an Excel workbook from Power BI, meaning that the Excel workbook will just render within the context of your Power BI environment. And so Power BI is just able to use Excel online behind the scenes to do its rendering. You can also, instead of connecting to an Excel workbook, you can import one. And what's going to happen then is going to take the data from inside of worksheets or possibly the data from inside of the data model, and it's going to import it and create a Power BI data set, which then you could start building Power BI reports and data sets on top, or Power BI reports and dashboards on top of. Now, you can also create custom applications. If you're an application developer, there's lots of ways to take advantage of the Power BI service and things like the Power BI REST API. Now, how about consumers? So if you've built a solution and it's a reporting or data analytics solution with Power BI, what's your reach? Well, first of all, anybody using a browser on any operating system and any modern browser is going to be able to get to the Power BI service and look at your dashboards and reports. Also, what's really powerful about Power BI is from the ground up, the platform was really designed with mobile in mind. So there are native applications, just the Power BI app, that you install on iPads, iPhones, Android phones, Windows 10 phones. And so it's a platform where when you need to target these type of devices with reporting and data analytics solutions, it's a great platform for that. Much of that has come from Microsoft's acquisition of a company named Dataset and taking basically a lot of the code and a lot of the design concepts for mobile apps from Dataset and rolling it, right into the different report design environments in Power BI. And once again, if you're a custom application developer, you can create custom websites that host Power BI reports and dashboard tiles. Now, if you take the Power BI Bootcamp course with us, in the very first lab, we're going to make you go off and create your own Office 365 enterprise trial account. Now, I put the link here on the slide. If you go and download the PDF file for the slide, click on the link, you'll go to a page hosted by Microsoft. You'll fill out some information. You don't need a credit card. You need a mobile device that supports text, because you're going to put in a phone number and they're going to text you an access code. But any in the world can create one of these trial tenants, which is good for 30 days. And so then you're not just an independent person using Power BI, but you're managing an organization. And you can have your primary Office 365 account that you create your reports and dashboards in. And then you can create secondary user accounts, log in as them, and you can basically start doing things like testing security with the new row-level security feature. Now, another important thing to think about is what version. So there are two different versions of Power BI. There's the standard, or what they call the free version, which is obviously free. And then there's the Power BI Pro that Microsoft is selling for $10 per month per user. Now, there are some differences in the two different licenses. You can see on this slide, 1 gigabyte versus 10 gigabytes. That's how much data that you can upload in your data sets in Power BI. So you have 10 times more. Also, if you're building real-time dashboards based on streaming data, you can basically stream a lot more data with the Pro license. Now, as far as your ability to refresh a data set, let's say that you've created a solution and you're getting data from Google Analytics. How often do you want to pull back that data? If you have a standard or free version, you can only refresh the data once a day. So if you have a Pro version, you can refresh up to 8 times a day, and you can pick whatever times you want. It could be 6 a.m., then again at 9 a.m., then at noon, then at 3. Okay, now there's a bunch of other features you see on the slide that you require the Pro license for. And what I would say is that if you plan to use Power BI in an organization and you have some people who are authoring reports and different types of custom solutions and other people consuming, you're going to want to have everyone have a Power BI Pro license. So they've really kind of made it, once you're not just a lone wolf using it, but you're within an organization that wants to do stage deployments, everyone's going to need really the Power BI license, because you need them to use content packs, to be able to use group workspaces, and to be able to use row-level security. Okay, that being said, even if you work in a company and 200 people, are paying $10 per month, if you compare that to some of the other similar offerings out there, in particular the industry leader Tableau, you're going to find that in a lot of scenarios that Power BI is going to be 20 to 30% of the cost of Tableau for the environment. And so you have this dynamic that's a lot like SharePoint back in 2007 through 2010, when it didn't do as much as a lot of the other file management systems like FileNet and Documentum and eRoom. But when something costs 20% of the cost, you really have to justify why you need those other products. So I do see Microsoft getting some adoption just because it's going to be very cost competitive against Tableau and some of the other industry leaders. Okay, well, the next thing we have to do is talk about datasets, reports, and dashboards. Let's go ahead and start by talking about a very central concept inside of Power BI, which is that of the workspace. Now, when you begin using Power BI, you have one workspace, which is your personal workspace, which has the name My Workspace. And the workspace is a container. And the idea is you have three collections: dashboards, reports, and datasets. And in your own personal workspace named My Workspace, you can create as many of these as you want. Now, we can also create group workspaces. And group workspaces are important when you have team-based development, because I can edit things in my workspace, but no one else can. So we generally need to create group workspaces that have read-write capabilities to start having a team-based approach where you and I can both work on the same set of reports and the same set of dashboards inside there. Now, beyond the workspace, we then have the idea of a dashboard. The dashboard is typically the first thing seen by the user when he or she comes to your custom solution. So the dashboard typically shows a high-level consolidated view. And the dashboard also provides a very convenient entry point for those in mobile devices. So there's a lot about the dashboard that when we start using the designer, things that we put on dashboards named tiles, they snap to a grid, mainly to give a better appearance for mobile devices. Now, in addition to dashboards, we have reports. If dashboards generally show the high-level overview, reports are where we can drill down into the weeds. Now, reports also give us the ability to add slicers and other types of interactive controls. So if people want to drill down and down and down further into detail, we do those in reports, not inside of dashboards. And then finally, there is the idea of a data set. And so a data set is just basically a set of one or more tables. So a data set can be very simple. It could simply be a customer's table that has 10 rows and 3 columns. Or a data set could have many different tables. Maybe we have a couple tables that we've imported from some type of operational SQL Server database, and then maybe we have some lookup tables, one that we've pulled from a CSV file from across the network, another lookup table in an Excel workbook. And the idea is you can pull data from many different places together and create a single data set, and then to use the different tools in the Power BI desktop tool to start modeling the data and start adding value by adding things like calculated columns, measures, dimensional hierarchies, and such. Once you have a Power BI license, the Office 365 launcher should be able to show you that inside there. And we can navigate inside. Now you have this left navigation pane. As you see, what's become very trendy in Office 365 and Azure and all the Microsoft cloud-based services is that you have this left navigation that collapses, and it's typically collapsed by default, and we can expand it to find things that are inside there. Now, when you have a dashboard, dashboards are composed of tiles. So let me move back over here. Let me go back over and kind of take a look at a typical dashboard. So the idea of a dashboard is as you're laying these things out, you have tiles. You can also see that the tiles snap into a grid system inside there. Also note that since dashboards are really something that you can tune for mobile devices, in my dashboard, if I come over here and I switch over to the phone view, and we go ahead, switch over here, one of the things that you could see is, maybe this will look better, smaller or larger, inside. So you're able to move things, you're able to remove things from the mobile view that you wouldn't be able to see from the other view inside there. Okay. So once again, a dashboard is a collection of tiles, and those tiles often get created by going to a report with a visual and pinning the visual. Or there are other ways, such as running a query on an underlying data set and then being able to pin the query result inside there. Okay. Now, if you're on a dashboard and there is a tile that's been created from a report visual and you click on it, you'll automatically navigate into the report. So once again, let's go to a particular dashboard. And so, you can think of this is where the user is going to start, his or her journey through your solution. And then they see something and they decide that they want to drill down. They click on that and basically they'll navigate to a report page where they can basically drill down into the weeds. Now, excuse me, another thing. When you have reports have at least one page and can have multiple pages. So it's at the bottom of the report that you see the page navigation. As you're designing reports, you can add as many pages as you'd like. Okay. Now, when you start report authoring, Let me move over, and let's say that I now drill down, into this edit mode. And the idea of edit mode is then you have this set of visualizations and you have a fields list. So remember that every single report is directly bound to exactly one underlying data set. So you can't create a report and have it pull from two different data sets. All the data has to be in the same data set for this particular report. And then you see the data set, which is basically one or more tables and fields inside here. And you're able to start taking these types of visuals, or what we call visualizations, and dragging and dropping them on the particular form itself. Now, we have these things which we refer to as visuals or visualizations. A funny story is the Power BI team about 2 years ago, anytime they referred to the term, they always said visualization. And then I think the thinking got to be, this is a really long word. And so visual has kind of crept into our terminology to have the exact same meaning as visualization. Now you can see visuals inside the visualization list. There's about 3 or 4 different ways to add a visual to a report. You can click one of the visualization buttons in the visualizations list, or you can just start clicking on checkboxes inside the fields list. Now, when we start editing properties, let me go back to this report for 1 second. Let's say that I select this particular visual, and then I have these 3 different panes right here. So one of the things to see here is that the first pane is the fields pane. It has wells, and generally that's where you're going to add fields from the data set that's associated with this particular report. You also have the format pane that has kind of the appearance properties. Now, something they just added about a month ago was the analytics pane. The analytics pane has things like trend lines. It doesn't get a lot of use yet because it's new, but what you'll see is that the analytics pane will kind of grow in functionality with different visuals, over the next year. Okay, now we have underlying reports and data sets. And the idea with these underlying reports and data sets is that they give us the fields from which we create our visuals. Now, one other thing to see is that there is a built-in set of visuals that are part of Power BI. However, unlike other industry-leading BI frameworks like Tableau, which is not open-ended, the people at Microsoft decided to make the whole visual framework an open proposition to developers, which means that any developer that can program with JavaScript is capable of creating a custom visual. And so Microsoft has been running a lot of contests, getting developers excited about creating visuals and showcasing them in their gallery. Okay, just as an example, there's not a histogram that's built into Power BI, but you can go to the gallery and download a histogram. Also, there's nothing that allows you to take a hierarchy and put a slicer unless you go to the gallery and get the hierarchy slicer. So there's lots of good custom visuals. And so for organizations that have data scientists and developers, the idea that they would build custom visuals, is not a huge undertaking. They've really refactored the model and made it, fairly acceptable to developers to get up to speed on and start creating things inside there. Okay. Now, as far as creating dashboards go, let's say that I go back here and I've got my particular dashboard, or I'm sorry, this is a particular report. And so let's say that I want to build a dashboard. Well, one way is on a report, I can just click on a little thumbtack, say I'd like to create a new dashboard, and I'll create this new dashboard inside here. And so there's this dashboard. And now I can start going back to other places, and finding different things and pinning them to this particular dashboard. So unlike a report, a dashboard is not strictly bound to an underlying data set. If you delete a data set, all the reports associated with that data set will be deleted. If you delete a data set, it will never delete the dashboard. It might remove visuals that were based on the data set, but once again, dashboards can be a mashup because they can have data from any or all the data sets in a particular workspace inside there. Okay, so now we've seen some of the basics inside. Let's go ahead and talk about getting started with this tool, which is Power BI Desktop. Now, Power BI Desktop is an important tool that we're going to use as we use Power BI. Now, the reason that Power BI Desktop is important is that it allows you to build projects that get saved in a local file format, and this tool is going to let you use query features that you might have come to know as the Power Query technology. Now, while query features are based on Power Query technology, Microsoft has retired Power Query as a brand name. So while back in Excel 2013, we said Power Query this and Power Query that, now we just talk about the query features in Power BI Desktop or the query features in Excel 2016. Also, there is technology in Excel called Power Pivot. And once again, Microsoft has kind of retired that brand name. So we're kind of using Power Pivot technology in Power BI Desktop, but we refer to it as the data modeling capabilities and the DAX or data analysis expression language for data modeling. Now, the other thing Power BI Desktop gives us is a report designer, which is very much like the report designer you have inside of the browser. Note a couple things Power BI Desktop does not do. It does not help you build dashboards. So ultimately, you're going to use Power BI Desktop. You're going to create queries to extract data and build a data model. You're then going to use the data modeling facilities. Think of it as Power Pivot if you know what Power Pivot is. And you're going to start adding calculated columns and measures and hierarchies. And once you've done that, you can design a report. Now, note that each Power BI Desktop project contains a single data set, which is your data model, and a single report. And the idea is that then you'd publish that up to the Power BI service, and then through the browser, you'd build dashboards, and then you'd figure out how to deploy the dashboards and reports to your users. Now, Power BI Desktop can be installed in seconds. Basically, what you're going to do is you are going to download. If I go back to the Power BI service, we pull this down and we install Power BI Desktop. Typically, it downloads in 10 to 15 seconds. It installs in under a minute, and you're good to go. Okay, let's go ahead and fire up Power BI Desktop for a second. One other thing that I want to do is get some data. Okay, so because it's football season, I thought we'd do a little demo, and note that there are different websites that the NFL has. And each one of these websites has a table inside of it that has its players. And what's nice is that all 32 teams have a very consistent HTML table layout. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this new project inside here. Okay, let's go ahead. And the first thing I want to do is I want to save my particular project. I'll come back here and I'll save this as NYG for the New York Giants. And so now let's go ahead and get some data. So here we're going to basically say, I'd like to get some data from the web. Now, once we've done that, you're going to put the URL to some particular page that has an HTML table on it. Now, here's where the data wrangling comes in. So this tool is able to go look at those different pages. Believe it or not.
Savings at mybobs.com.
Oh, yes. And if you leave the, well, you heard that little noise come up there because it's one of the things on the page that had a little ad. Okay, confused me. Let's go ahead and choose Edit. So basically now what I've done is I'm using the query tools and I'm pulling data back. Now, let's do a quick drive through what you can do. Well, first of all, let's go ahead and change the name of the query. So when it returns data, it's pretty obvious. Now, also, note that they give in the player's number. And so some of the things that you do when you're transforming data is to convert things that are not numeric to numeric so you can measure them. Let's say for various reasons I want to take the name and I want to split it out. So the query tools provide all these different ways that I could start splitting things out. Let's go ahead and split that by comma. Okay, so now we have last name and we have first name inside here. Now, as we keep going through here, what you can see is you have things like weight. And so I can see that it's converted that to a whole number. Okay, that's great. So for this column, maybe all I really care about doing is changing the name. Same thing for age, just make sure it is a whole number. Okay, now when I go over here to experience, I have this problem where this is the years of experience that the player has. However, for rookies, instead of putting 0, they put R. So what the query tools allow me to do is to clean up the data by picking that particular column, going over and picking replace values. I'd like you to find everywhere where it's R, and I'd like you to replace that with the number 0. And so now that we've done that turnaround inside there, now we can go ahead and convert that to a whole number. And so now we have some numbers that we can crunch and start getting sums, averages, standard deviations, things like that inside there. Now, here's one that's going to take a little bit more work. So I want to figure out who the tallest players are. However, it's hard for me to work with 5'11", 6'1". So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this particular column and I'm going to split it out. And we're going to split this out by a custom delimiter. And that custom delimiter is the hyphen. So we go ahead and do that. And so now what we have is we have the number of feet and the number of inches for each particular player. Okay, now that we've got that, let's go to Add Column, and we're going to click on Add Column here. Now, when you're working with the query language, and this is the same whether you're using Power Query in 2013 or the query features that are no longer called Power Query in Excel 2016 or Power BI Desktop, behind the scenes there is this language which is called M, the letter M. And so as I work inside here, so let's say that now I want to do height, and that height is going to be in inches. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to find the feet, and we want to multiply that by 12, and then we'll go ahead and we'll add the inches to it. So really, we're writing a small formula inside of the M language inside here. And now let's go ahead and do some conversion inside here. So once again, we'll convert that to a whole number. Now, I can keep going inside here. What I want to do is I want to turn over to another solution right here. And in this other solution, well, actually before I do that, let me go ahead and save. I'm going to go ahead and save my work because I want to take a quick look at this file that got generated, which is basically the PBIX file. So every time you work with Power BI Desktop, you save projects locally in these PBIX files. Now, as far as PBIX files, you're going to have data sources, and it could be an on-prem SQL database, it could be a SQL database up in the cloud, it could be an Excel workbook on a file share, but the idea is that the data sources get saved inside, and the data sources are going to save inside, as are the query definitions. Now, if you import a lot of data, that also gets saved inside of that PBIX file. Now, the PBIX file contains exactly one data set, which is your data model, and exactly one report. But note that that one data model can be built by pulling some data from SQL Server, some lookup data from a CVS file, some lookup data from an Excel workbook. Okay, one thing that the PBIX project file never contains is any type of data source credentials. Anytime you have to give Power BI Desktop a username and a password to access data, that's not stored inside the PBIX file, that's stored inside another local file. So if I take a PBIX file and I pass it to you and you try to refresh the data, you're going to have to basically tell it, what the credentials are. So just to err on the side of caution, they decided that the PBIX file would never contain any type of credentials, and those have to be configured outside the PBIX file. Now, a little bit about project management. Let's say that I have this particular project. So what we're going to see is it's pretty easy for us to publish that to Power BI, to the Power BI service. Okay. Now, while I haven't done much in terms of creating reports inside here yet. Let me go ahead and just go through a publish operation. Now, when I choose publish, Power BI Desktop says, okay, you have a data set, and I just did the querying. But imagine I did some data modeling, and then I've created a report that has 10 nice pages. When we go ahead and publish, we're basically pushing that data set and that report up inside there. Okay, just so I have something here, let me go ahead and we'll have the first name, last name inside here, just so you can at least see something inside there. I'll take the player's number. We're going to look at something a little bit more in depth in just a second, but let me go ahead and publish this one more time. And so after we publish something, we basically moved it from our local project file. We've pushed it into Power BI Desktop. And so what you're going to see here, once I have logged in here, is that, let's go back here, and what we should be able to see is there's indeed the data set, and there's indeed the report. Now, the idea is that Power BI Desktop will not provide dashboards for you. You'll have to go ahead and build those out inside the browser. And you can basically do that by coming here and saying new dashboard, New York Giants, go ahead, add that inside there. And so now you have a dashboard that you can start building inside there. But just remember that what we have in terms of Power BI Desktop assets, every project equals one data set and one report, and they have the exact same name as the PBIX file. Okay, now, let's say that I want to configure the underlying data set. So here, I've pulled back things from the New York Giants website. What if they have some type of a change tomorrow? So if I say schedule refresh, what you're going to see is that we need to edit credentials. And you might have a data source that's based on a SQL database where you have to put in a username and password. You might have other web-based data sources where you have credentials stored some other way. Even in this case, where the data source is being accessed via anonymous access, you always have to go up and configure that particular data set inside there. So now that we've configured that particular data set, I can come back here and I can do either a scheduled refresh to refresh once a day, or I can say refresh now. If I say refresh now inside here, you can see these little spinning things right here. And so right now, the Power BI service is reaching out to the New York Giants website and basically pulling the fresh information inside there. Okay. Now, let's go look at a solution that's got a little bit more to it. So one of the things that I wanted to show here is that I've got a project which doesn't just use one team. It basically uses all 32 teams. And it basically pulls the data in and appends every single player that is on the active roster into a single data model right here. So when you're working with Power BI Desktop, we basically have a data model that we're building. If I go and take a look at the queries right here, you can see that here we have an individual query, for each one of these particular teams inside here. And then we have one particular roll-up query. Now, we also have some queries so that we can take the football positions in these little codes and kind of put a little bit more clarity. So when we're using Power BI, quite often these lookup tables give us a lot of benefit in being able to drill down on the data. And now if we look at this particular table right here, this particular query, you can see that we have, all these different append queries inside here that we're rolling up, all the data from all these different places inside. And at the end, we're basically dropping things in and we're building just one big table with all the players inside there. Now here we have a report. And so here's an example of building a report. And you can see this report has all these different pages inside there looking at different aspects. Now also, if I take a look at this and we start looking at different things, for instance, I want to have measures. So I have things like average age. And for average age, we're basically writing DAX formulas. So it's kind of like the Excel formula language, but it's data analytics expression language inside there. Let's look at something a little bit more complicated. Let's look at this rank function inside here. So there's this rank X function. And so we want to basically figure out who are the heaviest players in the NFL. And so what you could do is you could add these inside here. I'll come back and talk about this in just a little bit. But now I've already published this report. Once again, if I look at the NFL player statistics, which this report is, and I go to scheduled refresh, you can see that here I had to go and basically approve of 32 different queries that we're going to go and run anonymous access inside there. But now I can do something like schedule refresh. So if things are changing, what we could do is we could schedule refresh so that we were doing something daily. I could basically say daily at a specific time inside there. If you have Power BI Pro, you can add up to 8 times a day. If you basically don't have Power BI Pro, you can add 1 time a day inside there. So the data is being refreshed, and every time the data is refreshed, it runs through that particular query transform and produces the data. Now, if we go ahead and we take a look at this particular chart right here, so you have your teams by city. We can look at the different teams inside here. We can put basically, different slicers on to look at different things inside. Okay, let's look at some of the other things that we have. How can we break down, this data that we just find on these home pages of the NFL team rosters? So maybe I want to see, which colleges are best represented in the NFL. So if you went to Alabama, Florida State, you could see that they are pretty up there as far as the number of players that they have inside there. How about popular names? Do you know that there are 25 players in the NFL named Chris? Okay. Now, let's go ahead and do a drill down inside here. So here's this particular case. Let's go back here and kind of take a look, but we basically built this hierarchy inside here. And the idea is that if we can build a hierarchy on the conference, then division, then the team, then the player, we can give you a pretty good drill down experience. Now, the way that this works is that you have to click to go into drill down mode. And what this is tracking is total experience by years. So basically, we're just taking all the years of experience that players have and summing them up. So if we look at the AFC, what we can see is that the AFC East has more experience than the others. Hey, look at the AFC West, 650 compared to 950 inside there. If I keep drilling down, to this level, into the Bills or into the Patriots, we go ahead and click on that. You can see here that we have individual players. Oh my God, I did not know Tom Brady was 17 years old or 17 years of experience. But you kind of get the idea of, how you can create these different experiences inside here. Okay, now let's go to heaviest players. I go to heaviest players, and here we're using a custom visual so that we can take our hierarchy and we can start looking at, who is the heaviest defensive player in the league, or maybe, who is the heaviest offensive player, who is the heaviest defensive lineman. Maybe I don't care about defensive linemen, but instead, who is the heaviest quarterback, inside the league. So what you're able to do is provide these drill down scenarios. Now, as we're starting to work with this inside here, being able to have these rank functions inside there allow you to create charts that show, top revenue customers, top selling products, things like that, which get to be an important part of working with this. Okay. Also, here I have the scatter chart right here. So we're taking every single player and we're basically plotting the player's number by the player's weight. Now, I have this thesis, and the central theory of the thesis is that as the player's number goes up, the weight goes up as well. Okay, that works great, except for all these darn offensive players who are skinny as a bean and they have numbers in the 80s. So if I go and I just look at the defensive players instead of the offensive players, well, now I see a trend line kind of going up there. If I basically just look at the offensive players, it's not quite so distinct. Yet do we want to start, drilling down and seeing, how these works for, all sets of players, in one particular scenario right here. Okay. So once again, the big picture is we were able to take what we've done here by building a data model and then starting to build different visualizations on top of that, and then complement that by having some type of interactive ability in the report for a user to be able to drill down into. Okay, now let's keep going. Let's go through a couple more slides here. Now, when you publish a project, you basically get one data set and one report that have the exact same name as your project. Also, we looked a little bit at dataset configuration. So with dataset configuration, configuring data source credentials so that you can refresh the data gets to be an essential topic inside here. Also, you can configure row level security, which begs the question, what is row level security? So row level security allows you to start creating different roles. So as a, for instance, back inside of one of my particular projects, if we go to modeling and I say manage roles, I can start creating different roles inside here. Now back on the slide, you can see that maybe you create roles for central region sales and eastern region sales. And then once you create a role, each role has one or more DAX expressions that define a filter, which basically then creates a subset of rows in your underlying data set that this user can see. So once you import data, you can configure all your security right inside of Power BI. Okay, now arguably I've described a very complex feature very quickly. There's a lot more to it, but hopefully that kind of gives you the idea of what row level security is. Now, the next thing we have to understand is this whole idea of group workspaces. Now, if I go back to Power BI and inside of the browser here, I come down here, notice that I've already created two workspaces. If I want to create another workspace, so maybe this is the wingtip, Q&A site inside here. Now, whenever you create a workspace, do you want to make it public to everyone in your organization? Or you can make it private, so you have to be invited. Also, there are those workspaces where we do authoring, and it's basically the people on the team that are building the reports and dashboards and publishing Power BI projects. So they'll have edit capabilities if you add them inside here. Also, we can create workspaces that are read-only. And the key there is when you build things in a workspace that is read-write, you can then basically push what you've done into the read-only workspace, and we're going to see how that works in just a second. Okay, as an example right here, let's say that up inside of wingtip development, we haven't done anything yet. Okay, so let's go back and let's go ahead and we'll publish, but this time we'll publish to our development workspace. I'll go ahead, we'll push that inside there. Okay, so now that we have taken this project that I've done with Power BI Desktop and we have pushed this inside, let's go back and I'll refresh my particular view of this workspace right here. And once I have refreshed this workspace right here, you can see that, there's my underlying data set. There is the underlying report. Maybe just real quickly, we'll go to this particular report and we'll start pinning things inside there. And so this will be NFL player stats inside there. We'll go ahead and choose pin. And we'll go to some other places, such as weight by numbers, and we'll basically have no slicer selected, and we'll go ahead and we'll add that inside there. Okay, so at this point, we have a data set, we have a report, and we have a dashboard that we've created. Now, certainly I could do a lot more with a dashboard. But now the next thing we want to cover is how do we push this out? So we started by creating an editable group workspace to do our development work in. We've also created a group workspace which is read-only, generally intended for production. And once we've done that, well, now we can create and publish what we've done using a content pack. Okay, so let's go back here, and I'm going to come down, and what we have inside here is the create content pack. So I'm going to publish this to the entire organization, and we'll call this NFL player stats. And with this particular solution right here, I can basically put a description, but now if I had many dashboards and reports, I'd have to pick the ones that I want. Notice that when I pick a particular dashboard, any report or data set which has a dependency is automatically seen inside there. And so now we'll go ahead and we'll click on Publish. And so now we've published this inside there. Okay, now let's go ahead and move over to that other workspace. So now if I go back to Production, well, now I want to basically activate a content pack. So we'll go back here, and now if I look in my organization, there is the content pack that I just created. And so now we'll activate that. But what's important to see here is because this is a read-only workspace, the users can't do anything. They can't get into edit mode. They can see the dashboard. If they click on the dashboard, they can drill down, into the report and get the, base of the report, but there's nothing for them to edit or screw up. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at this dashboard right here. Now let's say that after you push this into production, you want to make some more changes. So now I'm going to go back to my development workspace. Let's go back to my report, and let's say that, well, I went to Vanderbilt, so there's not going to be any kind of impressive college karma I'm going to get here. Imagine I went to Alabama and that you went to Louisiana Tech, and I wanted to, make that apparent to you that my team's better. We'll go ahead, we'll pin that inside there. Probably not a great example of something to put on a dashboard inside here. But now that we've done that, I've made changes to something that's in the dev workspace that I've previously published with a content pack. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to view the content pack. Under Edit Content Pack, notice that there is an Update option. So we'll go ahead and push the Update inside there. And now let's go back to the production workspace, and you can see it is seamlessly updated. So having this project workflow where you basically publish and do all your work in a read-write group workspace, and then you publish and update via content packs is the best practice today for rolling things out. Now, certainly there's still a lot of criticism of working with Power BI Desktop. All the projects are kind of seen as one file. It's kind of hard for individuals, for teams to kind of split things up within a Power BI Desktop project. And hopefully that's something that's going to be addressed, in the not too distant future. Okay, as we keep going through here, one other thing I want to mention, because you'll hear a lot about it, is this idea of a Power BI gateway. Now, let's say that your data is on-prem. Well, it's no problem in the initial publishing, because you might be running on a machine that's inside of your own local area network. You're running on a machine that's within an Active Directory domain. So with Power BI Desktop, you can reach to that SQL database, and you can authenticate with Windows authentication, pull back the data, and then you can push it back up into Power BI. But now, how is Power BI going to reach back and refresh that data without you having to open up Power BI Desktop, refresh, and republish? And the answer is a Power BI gateway. So the idea of a Power BI gateway is that it's an agent that you install that runs on one of the computers inside of your local area network. Now, there are two types of gateways. There's the personal gateway that you could probably just run on your laptop in most scenarios. And then there is the on-premises gateway that the IT staff would install on a server. But the idea is Power BI doesn't need to call into you, because the main way that the gateway communicates is that it creates a connection with Azure Service Bus. So Azure Service Bus, first of all, gives us a secure channel to communicate. Also, it's based on Azure Service Bus. So it basically uses message queuing. And so message queuing gives us a much higher level of guarantees that when a refresh request comes in, it's going to be serviced. So the idea is that when your Power BI gateway initializes, it creates the service bus connection so that either side can send a message. Now, let's say that you've rescheduled refresh for once a day. What's going to happen is, since that service bus connection is already established, they can send a request message in. Now, the Power BI gateway runs inside of the LAN. So if it's a personal gateway, it's already logged in under your identity. If it's a on-premises gateway, it could log in under any identity. And there's even a way to basically push identities from the cloud and have them switched over to local Windows identity if you've gone down the road of all the hybrid integration with Office 365. But the idea is then the Power BI gateway right inside the LAN can extract the data and push it back. Now, when do you need a gateway? Typically when you're working with on-premises data. When you're working with things like anonymous access requests across the internet, certainly don't need a gateway for that. If you're getting data from a cloud-based resource, such as a SharePoint online list or a Azure SQL database, once again, no gateway is required because the Power BI service can reach into those other cloud services. It's pretty much when data lives on a single machine or it lives in the context of a LAN and only a local Active Directory Windows-based identity can access that resource. So the Power BI gateway kind of solves that particular problem for us. Once again, we have two different gateways. There's the personal gateway. There's the on-premises gateway. Either one you're working with requires you to be working with the pro license and not the free license. Okay. Now, we've covered a lot of stuff here. Let me just kind of end with a couple of comments about staying in sync. So the Power BI service is updating monthly. So if you knew everything there was to know about the Power BI service at the beginning of the year and then you fell asleep, well, they've added row-level security. They've added things like predefined tables, predefined styles for tables and matrices. You know, for instance, if I go back and we take a look at this particular table right here. So if we go to heaviest players, and now we actually, I'm going to have to go back into my read-write version of this. And now we'll go back to heaviest players. And if I now go into edit report mode and we go to this particular table right here and we go over to this, now we have table style. You know, what we found is a couple months ago this didn't exist. All of a sudden, one day, you'll go back and there'll be new capabilities. So in July, they gave us the ability to add, you know, these two individual tables, and then in August, they kind of extended it to work with matrices, you know, as well. So there's just lots of new things that are changing. Conditional formatted in tables, quick calc, customizable tooltips, trend lines, conditional columns. You know, so all these things are changing, and it's important that you keep on top of things. So the way that you keep on top of things is that the Power BI team has a blog, and they're pretty consistent in pushing things out the very last few days of the month. So I always go back, and for the last 7 days of the month, I'm going back and checking every morning to see if that blog entry is there. And it's going to step through and have some text and show me some short videos, you know, about how to consume, you know, all the new functionality that we have inside there. Okay. Once again, let me go ahead and mention that we have a 4-day deep dive hands-on training class, Power BI Bootcamp, with lots of deep labs. We have one just the week after Thanksgiving from Tuesday to Friday, one in January. And either you can come to Tampa and attend at Tech Sherpas, which is our hosting company, or you can attend remotely. We have drilled down into a lot of Power BI desktop, really trying to master the querying tools and the data modeling tools, and then the process of being able to build out dashboards, being able to deploy dashboards and reports using content packs and group workspaces, concentrating on mobile, concentrating on working with gateways, and then also seeing things like the Excel integration, the integration with SQL Server, and also we have one lecture that introduces you to R and shows you how to get up and going with R to build really impressive charts inside of Power BI Desktop. Okay, so if you want to grab the slides are here in this little URL. So with that, I apologize that in the beginning somehow my slides froze and I didn't pick up on that soon enough. Okay, but at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and see any type of questions that we have. Okay, here's a question. You have step-by-step set of guides on the ABBA Service Bus configuration. And it turns out you don't really need to set up Azure Service Bus. You basically install a Power BI gateway inside there. Let me take you, that's a good question. I'll come back to this slide and show you this URL in 1 second. But what I'd like to do is go back to the browser here. And inside the browser, I'm going to go to github.com. And GitHub has a lot of different things. And our company, Critical Path Training, up there has a bunch of repositories. Now, there's one repository called the Power BI Party Pack. And once again, just go to github.com, Critical Path Training. If you find this, you can basically find the NFL PBIX project that I just showed you if you want to play around with the NFL players. Also, we have the Power BI Bootcamp, which is PBI 365. And if you drill down, once again, github.com, Critical Path Training, PBI 365. So if you take the course, or even if you don't take the course, you have access to this repository because it's public. If you go into the different modules, and there is a module on gateways inside here, note that every single lab we have is both a PDF and an XPS file. So for instance, if I download this guy right here and I start this up and now I open this up inside here. So basically to answer your question, if you go and you find this particular file and then you go to exercise 3 here somewhere, here we'll kind of take you through the process of installing a gateway and picking either personal or on-premises gateway inside there. Okay. Let me get back here, put that slide back up, answer some other questions. Are Power BI reports in Silverlight? Great question, Gary. And the answer is absolutely not. Now, if you take Excel workbooks that have Power BI reports and you connect to them, you can basically surface them through Power BI and their Power View Silverlight dependencies will still be there. What's interesting is if you don't connect to an Excel workbook with Power BI reports, but instead you import it, it will generate Power BI reports. And let me give you a kind of a quick example of that back here. If I go back here, and once again, let's go back to my personal workspace. And within my personal workspace, let's look at, first of all, one particular Excel workbook. So I look at this particular Excel workbook and note that it works great. And then I get to the one report that has Power View inside there. And because I'm using Chrome, I get basically the Heisman. Now, if I go back here and I take that exact same URL and we put that inside here and we get to a page and you use Internet Explorer and you have Silverlight pre-installed, you're going to be able to make that work. However, even if you have IE and Silverlight's not installed, you're going to get these kind of problems. So I took the exact same workbook and instead of connecting to it, I imported it. And so what you're going to see here is that they're going to take every single Power View report and they're going to convert it just into a standard report page, and you're going to have non-Silverlight components inside here. Now, it's not perfect. It doesn't work with anything, with everything that you can put inside there, but once again, it gives you a pretty good approach for taking Power View, converting them out of the Power View format so you can rid yourself of those Silverlight dependencies and have a much broader reach. Okay. I'm just going to answer one or two more questions here. Okay, do you have to save online datasets in Power BI as PBIX before you can view them in Power BI Desktop? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Power BI Desktop could just be a tool that you pull back data to your desktop and you do all the data analysis right from there. So while Power BI Desktop is a tool for building reports and publishing things for others, it's also a great tool for the data wrangler who just wants a quick answer or wants a quick report, so I can basically print it out. And what's also important to see is that Power BI Desktop is completely free. There's no licensing. There's a lot to it that you can't really take advantage of unless you use the Power BI service, but certainly all its functionality for doing querying and data modeling and creating reports can be used without ever connecting to the Power BI service.